What is going on, everybody? Hello and welcome to Criticless Cast. Today we are going to be talking about the new John Krasinski film, If, Imaginary Friends. And this is starring Ryan Reynolds, John Krasinski, and Kaylee Fleming. Let's do this. Warning. The following show features reviews from wildly unprofessional critics operating without the supervision of professionals. The thoughts and opinions held by these individuals are not to be taken seriously and do not come from a place of intellectual integrity. This show doesn't reflect the opinions of Criticless or its users. Viewer discretion is advised. What's up? What's up? What is up, everybody? Hello and welcome to another episode of Criticless Cast Unhinged. We are back and fully unhinged today. Clearly, I am in an alternate persona. I'm not feeling businessy today. I'm feeling them Hail Satan vibes. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't even know what's happening anymore. This thing was full when we started, and it is 3/4 done, and we are just now getting rolling. So I hope you guys are ready for that 2:30 energy. And if you don't know what 2:30 energy is, then watch the news show. And if you aren't watching the news show, then what are you doing with your life? Get it together. So joining me today, as usual, is my co-host and best buddy, Mr. Christopher Cowles.
I feel so special. Hi, hello. What's up, everybody?
And also joining me today is my lovely wife, Sydney Andrews. She's here today too, Miss Criticless.
What's up, nerds? I'm just basking in the 2:30 energy.
Because that's what you guys got to get, because you're either getting 2:30 energy or you're getting like 1 o'clock in the morning energy. And if you're getting 1 o'clock in the morning energy, you're just going to go home. So what I'm saying is it's coming in hot, heavy. We are trying something new and spicy. This is going to be hot and heavy and fast, and we are going to sling it to you real quick. I hope you're ready for all of that. Because that's what you're getting. Because I'm not stalling, not wasting no time. We aren't even talking about Rotten Tomatoes, no critics, none of that. We're going to give you a spoiler-free review, and then we're going to give you a spoiler review of the movie If. And like I said, this is the John Krasinski film. It is written, starring, directed by. It is everything. You are getting the whole D by Mr. Krasinski.
The whole D.
The whole D, yes. The whole D. So that's the movie that you're getting. That's what he wanted you to have. And this is starring every celebrity in Hollywood. So I'm not even going to name any of them, because what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, think of a name.
Yeah, think of a name. They're in this, except for maybe like Danny DeVito. He was missing. I wish he was here.
I'm going to pick Steve Buscemi.
No, don't. No, don't talk about Buscemi. He's in the hospital.
I'm sorry. Did you say Steve Buscemi?
It's the robotic version.
Yeah.
Okay. I tried to say it right.
Yeah.
No, that's the robotic Steve. This is what happened after he went into the hospital and they sent him out a robot. Is Steve Buscemi.
Yes.
So
it's kind of like Machete.
Yes. Machete.
And Always Sunny.
Yes.
It's the combination of those.
I like that. Yeah, of Steve Buscemi. So with that being said, that's what we're going to talk about today. Like I said, we're not touching on Rotten Tomatoes. We're not getting into any of that. But first and foremost, I do want to tell you.
Tomatoes.
No, tomatoes. Did I say something about tomatoes? Oh, I understand what you're saying. Tomatoes are gross. I did mention those. All right. So listen.
He has not done cocaine. I promise. I need a disclaimer that's right now. I swear to God. The man has never touched it.
Listen, I'm ready to roll.
He might have touched
it. All right.
It's possible.
So first and foremost, if you are not a subscriber, member, whatever you want to consider it, user of Criticless, go to criticless.com. It is critic and then less, the two words, put them together as one, criticless.com. You will find us in the app stores, Apple or Android, and just go ahead, create an account, come say hi. I'm your MySpace Tom. I'll say what's up, leave a review or two, come join a group, leave a list, do all those fun things, because we are a movie and entertainment reviewing platform. And if you guys pack this thing out, we will be even more than that. We'll tackle video games, books, all sorts of things. So definitely come on, say what's up if you haven't already. Now, normally we do a longer format review, but today we're going to try and streamline things and just see how down and dirty we can give this thing to you. You are getting a review, spoiler-free, spoilery, and then we're rolling. So with that being said, guys, I guess we're going to dig into what we think. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you, since I am motor mouthing already, I'm going to let you know exactly what I think. I actually like this movie pretty well, but I don't think it's perfect. It's not flawless. It could be better. But I kind of want to throw John Krasinski a bone because this is classic filmmaking. This feels like a throwback to early 90s family films. If you don't know what this is about, it's about imaginary friends. This is a family film geared more towards children, supposed to be, but actually I personally think that John worked a little too hard to gear this towards adults. This is kind of like an art house family film from the 90s, which is a really weird descriptor, but I kind of think that that's the best way to put it. It has its flaws, and we have actually behind the scenes talked about it more than we normally do today. But so little spoilery there, but I think that this could have been done better, and it has some flaws, which we will get into in the spoiler review. But just with that being said, I think honestly, it's kind of this weird thing where I almost want to give this movie a participation trophy and give it like an 80% because it's not a bad film by any means. And I think it's very well made, but it does come with its flaws. And I don't think that it is going to go over perfectly and that everyone is going to love it, but I think your children will love it. I think that your family will have a fun time at the theater, and I think that we need to commend him for the type of film that he's trying to make. So with that being said, I'm going to give it like a low most excellent, high rad, somewhere in that territory on our rating scale. So we can move over to either of these.
Specifically.
Yeah,
what
specifically an 80.
80.
80. Yeah, that's what I'm going to give it. The lowest of most excellence, but that. And Sid, what do you think after I've sucked every last bit of air out of the room?
It's a good suck.
Yeah, it's a good suck. Yeah.
Correct. What do we say to that? No, so we went to see this with our kids and all of us. And I will say that I think having my kids in the theater, hearing them snickering at certain parts is actually funny. My daughter was sitting next to Chris and I heard them like whispering to each other, and that really brought the energy up. I would have probably enjoyed it less had I not had my kids there. But overall, there were some forgettable moments for sure for me, but I would say that I put it in the rad territory, and I think I put it in the low rad territory. So probably about like a 65 for me.
Yeah. So 65. So we're at a 70 and a 65. So you're rad, or well, I say an 80 and a 65. Sorry.
Yeah. So you're in most excellent territory. I am in low rad territory.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Yeah.
What about you, Chris?
I'm going to give this a 68. I'm going to split the difference between you two. I'm going to say it's, for my mind, it's a low rad, even though that's
or mid rad, because she's a low rad.
Right. So by our scale,
right,
on the
Criticless scale,
it is a mid. So I'll say it's mid. Mid is actually,
because mid would be a decent technically. That would be like a 50.
But he's saying mid when it comes to rad, right? That's what you mean. Like you're
you
in rad territory and you're like, it's mid, because like there's high rad,
right?
Which is
so like is this a millennial mid or like a Gen Z mid? Because like Gen Z mid would be like a 50, but a millennial mid is probably like a 65.
I'm gonna give it a 68.
We'll call it sticking to its guns.
Yep. And I think that is mid for what the scale that I'm putting it at, which is it's good, but it's not like go out of your way good or blow your mind.
But maybe
good.
What about with kids? Where do you sit? And you actually, my kids insisted on sitting beside you for this movie. Yeah. So it's like,
well, because
there are movies where it's like an adult.
And the grunkle.
Right. You're the grunkle. So it's like, do you tell, do you go see, like if you got grandkids or if you got nieces and nephews or whatever, is this worth going and seeing? Person's like, I mean, if someone's watching that has grandkids, no, I'm not saying Chris has grandkids. I mean,
not discriminating.
Don't judge him based on his gray hair. That doesn't mean he's a grandpa. Like,
I have
that's due to the businessman and his heroin. So
wow. Let's not talk about heroin.
But that's all I'm getting at. It's like, should adults who don't have kids go out and see this, or just stay at home and wait till it comes out on home release?
I would say if you don't have kids, it's less than a 50% go out and watch it. I would say if you have nothing better to do, sure, go out and see it. It's fine. I would say watch it on streaming whenever it gets to that point. If you don't have kids, if you do have kids, 100% watch it in the theaters. It was a great time. I loved sitting next to children.
Yeah. That landed perfectly.
And, because they enjoy things differently than we do.
Right.
And I respect that. And it was a good time. And it made me enjoy the movie way more. Like the fact that Dylan really liked this movie, and her
Right.
commentary on it, it enhanced the movie to a degree that would not be achievable if she was not there. So,
Right. And speaking
like
of, of commentary during this movie, you should know this. If you are here and you're watching the spoiler-free version and you're like, well, I'm not going to watch this in theaters, or I'm not going to watch this, like, I would say there is one primary spoiler that can affect your overall opinion of this movie, I would say. So if you are planning on seeing it, I would say do not watch the spoiler version of this review, because it might kind of ruin the movie. It really does change your perception of a lot of what is happening. And so our discussion going forward, once we get into the spoiler portion of this review, I just use your own judgment. But if you get once you get the spoiler, it's toast. Like it's one of those things. So just know that. So from now, are you guys good moving on into the spoiler discussion for this movie?
Sure.
And as much as I want y'all to keep listening, please keep listening if you want to, or just come back after you've seen it. So that's all I'm saying, is if you want a better experience, you might not want it spoiled. So, all right, spoilers on the way, all the way down from here, guys. So bail if you don't want it spoiled, and just come back later. So, all right, with that being said, this movie, it's a good time. I think, for myself, like I said, I feel like I'm doing the participation trophy thing, but I think that it's deserving of that, because this is very reminiscent of a 90s film. He is harkening back to taking his time, having a slower brewing, if move slower in the beginning, and he takes his time setting it up, and he really capitalizes on atmosphere. This does feel like an art house film, which is interesting. And we've seen John Krasinski, direct before, but in his previous stuff, he did horror, which he was surprising from him in general, and we weren't expecting. We would have expected something like comedy. But I actually feel like now that he's done a comedy, he doesn't quite have it figured out yet. He hasn't quite got his pulse on the comedy, because I think that is part of where it's missing. And like I said, we talked a little spoilery with one another, which we shouldn't have done before the review, but it happens sometimes. So one of the things that I spotted was just some of the comedy bits don't hit. It hits for kids, but for some of the adults, it's like when the bit happens, you're just kind of like, all right, yeah,
Like
I saw that.
You see it coming.
Yeah, where you're like, okay, great. Like for adults, now kids like it, so it's fine, but that's where I spotted some of the failures for me. But Chris, I think, has a finer tuned bead on the actual failure of this film. I want to commend him. He is really rounding himself out.
Before we go into that, I wanted to say something.
Okay.
You mentioned, you kind of glazed over it just there.
Yeah.
That it kind of harkens back to some like early 90s family movies, where they really take their time with the story, the plot development. They take their time with character development, and there's like a great payoff. Right. But so our son was not into it. He couldn't focus at the beginning.
He was ADDing through this movie hard.
He was really
too many treats.
He had a severe attention deficit, and he was just like messing with stuff and taking his shoes off.
We gave him too many snacks is the problem.
Yep.
The boy had a slushie, he had popcorn, and he had Cinnabon, and this kid was having a full-blown tism attack throughout this entire movie and just could not get it together. Like he just was.
But I think it's because the movie was taking its time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that reason, I think for millennials and people who appreciate that slower burn in movies like Hook, in movies like The Goonies, or whatever, that setup time period in the beginning that we recognize so much. Kids, my kids' age, just they're like, what is happening here? This isn't even a movie.
Because unfortunately, as humans, we've lost our attention span. And I even noticed it with myself with watching this, because he does take a little bit of time to set this movie up. And I think, honestly, it's worth it along the ride. And he really capitalizes on the orchestral nature of what he's done with this film. He clearly got there's an excellent score to this movie. It sounds fantastic. Like, it is just vibrant, and it is the life of the film throughout. There's a lot of moments in the movie that have no talking whatsoever. And it is just this rolling score, and it's very recognizable, to the point in which when you leave the theater, you're like humming the theme song. Like, that is the level of score that is in this movie, which is something to be applauded, I think, because he is really doing a lot of old cinematic tricks, but he does fail in one thing, in one major area, which is actually the screenwriting and story of this film, which I think Chris is going to expand on a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's it's talking about your son, Clark.
Yeah.
Love him. Right.
Love
Yeah.
that little guy.
That
Love
little
him.
guy.
That son of a bitch. He's fantastic. He literally handed me his shoe at one point in the movie because he was so comfortable, which I think can speak volumes
Right.
to the cinematography and the actual film.
Right.
If somebody's comfortable enough
to pass you a shoe.
hand you a shoe, you know,
And Chris and Clark is not a toddler. Let's be very clear. He is a grown man. He has chest hair. Like,
yeah. Oh no, I'm sure he does. Actually,
he thinks he does. No, he's like 9 years old. So he's not like, this is not a baby passing a shoe. This is a 9-year-old passing a shoe across.
Yeah. So it was a joy as a part of this movie to receive his
Shoe.
shoe, which I think was a Vans. I don't know. It was a high top,
No,
really stylish. But anyways, so I agree with Blaine as far as this being a 90s homage to film at that time. The only thing that I feel that was missing from this movie, which I feel like it was the biggest detriment to it, was that there was no antagonist that was like physically formed. So there was no like even a ghostly apparition of
There was no tension.
There was no adversary. There was
Right.
nothing that the lead character was fighting against.
Right, exactly. But beyond her own like mind. So it was just
interesting.
yes.
That was the adversary was her and her mind.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
which is odd for a film of this nature and for a family film where there's nothing that and that's the thing is like you kind of have to dig to even know that, because I mean really the fact of the matter is that this movie is about a young girl who is mentally insane and it's absolutely deranged, because that's what gets disclosed within the last little bit. Or if you're clever pretty much at all, because my daughter figured it out, Chris figured it out, I figured it out, all of us figured it out before the end of the movie, which is the big reveal, which is that Ryan Reynolds is not a creeper who hides out under young children's beds in their bedroom.
Surprise.
He is an imaginary friend who is extremely depressed. So you know, that's an interesting thing. But this girl, basically the entire movie is in her imagination. And this is just Fight Club for ladies.
Fight Club for young girls.
Young girls.
Not ladies.
Ladies. I mean, you know.
Young
we're not like discriminating.
Yeah.
It
No,
could
I'm just
be
saying,
ladies.
I'm just saying, like, I want a Fight Club for ladies. This was not a Fight Club for ladies. This was a Fight
Ooh.
Club for young ladies.
So that's a good, I mean, probably not relevant here or something we should get into, but I do want to know your thoughts of Fight Club for ladies. I want to know that movie.
Yeah, what is that?
And
movie?
we can sell that to Hollywood for Billillions.
Billillions.
Yeah.
If Fight Club
Or
for
Brazilian.
Brazilian.
Yeah. How many Brazilians?
How many Brazilian butt lifts does it cost?
Okay, so like Blaine said,
Sorry.
we did a little bit hash into this together off camera. So I want you to explain for the good people watching why this is Fight Club for young women.
Right. So I mean,
go into that more.
Right, because what's going on here is that this young girl is seeing Ryan Reynolds throughout the entire movie, and until somewhere near the end, you find out that that he is an imaginary friend. He is this clown. But then, when you really, the problem is though that this goes deeper than Fight Club, because like with Fight Club, Tyler Durden is also kind of the lead character, and they're like swapping bodies in a sense. Like he is becoming Tyler Durden at certain points. In this, the young girl is just imagining everything. She is completely insane. So, I mean, it's really kind of a wild concept that you have to analyze and try and decide how you want to approach this movie, because it's like it could get real dark if you look at it in the way that I'm talking about, where it's that this girl is just on her own. No parents paying attention to her. Her dad's in the hospital. Her grandma does not give a rat's rear
Grandma
end.
doesn't give a fuck.
No, 0 fucks given from grandmammy.
But But the funny thing is, with what Blaine is saying, a lot of the movie appears to be going on within this young girl's head.
Mhm.
So, whereas the viewer might think grandma is completely negligent and is just not aware of where her granddaughter is most of the time, it could just be that the granddaughter is in her room the whole time.
Right.
Although the movie
True.
is taking place in other settings, it may be that she's never really gone anywhere. So
Yeah. It's just kind of dark depending on how heavily you analyze the movie. So it really it depends. But the way that they paint it out is at the end, it makes it appear as though a lot of the side characters, including the grandma and many other people, actually get reunited with their imaginary characters. And so it makes you think that they are real and that they are really existing in this world and it is really happening, which is a little comforting when you were looking at it as this girl is just in a very dark place because she thinks her dad's going to die since her mom died and she is just struggling. So it all depends on how you want to look at this movie. And I mean, I think it's very fun. It's very well done. Don't get me wrong. I think the way that they did these characters and these creatures is very believable and realistic. But another failure that I think that happens with If is with Ryan Reynolds. And I think that this is a little bit to blame on some of the stuff that how Robert Krasinski decided to direct this movie, but we don't.
John Krasinski.
Or John, not Robert. I don't know why I said Robert. Who's Robert?
Who's Robert?
No one cares. So anyways, but John, the way that he decided to direct this was that he decided that we were going to get a very down, kind of in the dumps Ryan Reynolds for basically the entire movie up until, and honestly, even borderline after the reveal, is that his character is just very depressed. He was this clown, but now he's not goofy. His little girl doesn't recognize him, and she's spending all this time with him, but doesn't know. And so that's a bit of a problem because he never gets to be in this uplifting point where he's in these really fun scenes. There's a scene where they go into the imaginary world and they go underground inside of this theme park, and essentially, Ryan Reynolds, it just doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to encounter these people, that he knows that they are just as sad as he is. And he's going through all of these exciting, fun moments that the girl is having the time of her life. And he is extremely depressed. And it doesn't quite land, I think. And it takes some of the fun out of the movie because he's wanting to save the reveal.
And isn't that because they didn't let us in as the adults on the lead, like you said.
Yes.
If we had known, if we had been given a few more hints that he was her imaginary friend, and that she just didn't recognize him, we would have understood why he was so depressy and stressy.
Right.
But we didn't know.
No.
Or at least, at large, you don't know. So it's kind of just why is this guy? And that's the thing about Ryan Reynolds, is we've seen him act like this before. We have seen every facet of Ryan Reynolds, and he has a whole array of characters that he can play. The problem is we've seen him multifaceted. So we know that he can be a little bit like this, and that he can also be funny in the same film. He can also be hysterically funny in the same film. And you're just waiting for him to be hysterically funny. You're waiting for him to just turn over the leaf and just be wildly hilarious, and it never happens.
No.
So I think that's part of it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a letdown. So, I mean, Chris, you got anything else to expand on as far as?
Oh, I wanted to ask Chris about the emotional part, because this is a very emotional movie.
It is. And they're really pulling on your heartstrings from the moment it starts.
Right. And some of the reviews that are out there in the ether from the critics talk about how sappy sweet this movie is. I thought it was interesting for me. I'm an only child, but I do have children. I thought it was funny how the movie does try to pull on your heartstrings at multiple points. Where the dad is dying, the girl has already lost her mother. There's all these kind of sad things and elements to the movie. None of that made me cry. What made me want to cry was when she went up to the room of her imaginary friend, where she'd been spending the entire movie. She had been spending all of her time there with these people, and she goes up there to find that this room is not only it's there,
locked.
It's locked, and there is nothing but old crap in there. It's like an attic. It's completely devoid of everything that she had been hanging on to for the entire movie. That broke my heart. That actually is what made me cry. So, that's my little only child perspective. But I just wonder, I know we talked about a little bit, you kind of had a different emotional connection with the movie. So what did you think about the emotional, the evocative nature of the movie?
Right. I mean, it was, I feel like the point that they were trying to put forth was obviously children or any young people can have traumatic experiences, right? So it's how they how they deal with that.
Right,
So
cope.
right, yeah. So in this situation, she lost her mother, right? So it was a very traumatic situation, and the way that she dealt with it was by becoming an adult. Like that was the whole beginning premise for her who she was as a person. That was she was like, I'm not a child, and I'm an adult. So she was portraying that personality and trying to make herself be something that she wasn't.
Right.
And so in this movie, I feel like it tries to help people cope with what they're dealing with in the moment.
Right.
So rather than trying to put it off as something that I don't have to deal with because I am not a child, so this doesn't affect me. They're saying it as I'm an adult, so it doesn't affect me at all. And
So numbing herself, basically.
yeah, exactly. So it also focuses on memory. So remembering where you were during certain or impactful stances or
well, and what's interesting about this is that I feel like even everything that you're talking about, right? Like these are all very adult conversations. Like this is adult emotions, this is adult feelings, and I think that to some degree it's like a success and a failure, right? Because I feel like he's gearing this. These are a lot of adult things that you're dealing with, and kids. If they're watching this, they're not going to comprehend this quite in the same way, right? Like they're going to be like, "Oh, this is cool. This is about goofy little imaginary friends." But like all of us are coming at it with all of these other analysis, right? So it isn't.
Yeah, we're applying like an existential, like adult perspective on. But I mean, I think maybe that's what Krasinski was trying to do. So,
and maybe that's something to compliment him on.
It could be because like what Chris is talking about is just like the difference in sort of numbing out that a kid might do because they're overwhelmed with adult, possibly adult scenarios and adult emotions that might be just too much for them to handle, numbing out. And versus the opposite extreme would be being overly emotional and applying your feelings to everybody else and holding everybody else accountable for your emotions, which is too far on the other extreme. So I think maybe what Krasinski was trying to do was show us that there's a balance in the way that this can be perceived, in a sense.
Right. Yeah. It's a weird, and I've said this word so many times on this podcast, but dichotomy between like adulthood and childhood of how you deal with your emotions and working through trauma. And I don't know, I feel like they do a good job of investigating that portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's
it's almost deeper than you expect it to be. Like when we took our kids to see this, we just thought it was going to be kind of like I was thinking it was going to be kind of along the lines of Monsters Inc. for some reason. That's sort of what I had in my head. And it definitely wasn't. But again, I mean, if you were to ask kids about this, they would be giving you a much more simple explanation.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, that was the thing is like, we got out and, we were driving over here and my daughter was like, I just want an imaginary friend now. This is awesome. Like, this was the coolest movie ever. My son said the same thing, even though like he was halfway paying attention. But, and so it's going to be a very different experience for adults and kids. And I think there's a lot more to hash through if you're an adult. And honestly, with how much there is to hash through, I kind of hate that it isn't a little bit better executed, right? Because like it's just shy of being something really phenomenal, like something that we remember for a long time. And I kind of hate that for Krasinski because like I think if he had had a few more hands involved in this script other than his own, like this could have really been absolutely mind-blowing, not only to kids but adults, but it's going to fall short for adults, but at the same time give you something to talk about, but also be like, one, is this girl absolutely insane? Two, is Ryan Reynolds coming across as an absolute freaking creeper?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's important to talk about. Like I think most people that see this movie, until you figure out the big spoiler, which is that Ryan Reynolds is the main character girl's imaginary friend, that's who he is and it's who he's always been. Until you figure that out, that that's the case, it should be really disturbing that this grown man is just like frolicking around in kids' bedrooms. At one point, he's hiding underneath a child's bed. Like,
right.
yeah,
Also, as this like depressed, angry little like man, you're just like, oh,
yeah. Well,
this is a little weird.
And the funny thing too is like, I'm shocked that Krasinski didn't consider making Reynolds' character just a little bit more like whimsical, like
as the movie progresses.
Or yeah, so that's an interesting idea, like having his costume and his character progress whimsically throughout,
right. To where like the adults would notice, but the kids wouldn't. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, his costume gets a little wackier as the movie goes along. His persona gets a little happier, a little funnier, a little goofier. His just these little bits and pieces of him evolve as he is finding himself and as she is finding herself. And to where the reveal happens, maybe the adults see it coming. Who cares?
This makes me laugh because there's a user that we love on Criticless. His name is Jeremy. He
gets shout outs like every episode.
He gets shout outs all the time. His handle is I Miss Good Movies. But he will always analyze movies and say, you know what, this would have been great if it was this. Or let's turn this into a terrible script and make like a horrible movie out of it. Like he'll analyze things like that. I feel like this movie is very ripe for making it the greatest movie ever. Like apply the formula from Hook, the 1990s Robin Williams movie Hook. If you just add, like Chris said, an antagonist to
give us a villain.
Give us a villain.
An evil imaginary friend or an evil person who can also see imaginary friends. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming or too much of the plot, but just enough to give this girl something to fight for.
Mm-hmm, some tension. But to Chris's point earlier, the tension came from her own mind.
Because she's insane.
She's crazy. And that's what makes this almost like an existential.
Sorry to interrupt, but I have to tell you about this. So our son had to go pee right after I went to go pee and didn't even notice that I left. And so Sid had to leave. So we didn't get to tell you about the funniest part of this entire movie, which doesn't happen in the movie. So this was one of those theater experiences. It's only going to happen once in one place at one time. Special moment. You had to be there. But we were sitting there in the movie and there's a scene where they're talking about croissants and these buttery, delicious croissants. And they keep talking about them. And so the lead character, the girl, goes and she's bringing these croissants because she wants to trigger a memory within a real person to trigger his imaginary friend's connection with him, right? And so the girl has this croissant and she's going to bite the croissant. And she opens her mouth to bite the croissant. And someone in our theater lets out an orgasmic moan when this croissant is bit. She bites into the croissant and someone goes, oh! And it was one of the best moments ever. Chris and I, out of everyone in the theater, are just cackling and could not stop because the person, she goes to bite the croissant, and it was a real emotion from a person in the theater. It was not meant to be a joke. She bites the croissant and someone just goes, oh!
It was the most orgasmic.
Yes.
Like somebody loved croissants.
They want that croissant.
Really?
Yeah.
They really wanted that buttery.
I hate you missed it.
Crispy,
Like
just
the buttery crispy croissant.
It was so
literally
good.
like we're in that Dolby theater and we hear. It was one of the best moments I've ever had in the theater. Like and it was just like the whole theater.
This stresses me out because
all the
our
adults were
daughter
laughing.
already does some of the like social things where she'll be like ooh woo, and she
we're
does,
just like, don't do that.
yeah, she'll do that, and I'm like,
yeah,
stop.
she's
Like she
ooh-wooing.
doesn't know.
She
not
doesn't
to
know
do
what
that.
it is.
But there's also the one that
There's another one.
There's
too.
another one that's like a. It's just
Don't
sound.
do
I'm
it.
not going
Don't
to do
do
it
it.
because you freaks will freaking clip it out. 'Cause
Yeah.
I've seen what y'all do.
You dirty
You dirty weirdos. But anyways, she'll do that. And so now I'm wondering, like, is she going to remember
Right.
this. And
Maybe
like,
it was.
It was very short.
It was very
but
brief.
The fact that me and Blaine were laughing at it so hard,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm sure she.
oh, she's
triggered
gonna
on it.
remember it.
Oh, we
She's gonna
couldn't
know.
stop. I mean, it was some
And
of the
funny
funniest
thing
shit
is,
ever.
she's obsessed with comedy, so if she thinks that's gonna get laughs,
Oh, yeah.
she will start doing
Oh,
it, and
yeah.
I will be so devastated.
It was some
Yeah.
funny shit though. Like, and it was clear that whoever did it did not mean to do it. Like, it
No,
was
yeah.
an organic sound that came out of their body and instantly embarrassed. Like, it was
Dude,
like, "Ah!"
It was. There was nothing,
Nothing.
sexual behind
Nothing.
this. This
Nothing.
was purely. I mean, maybe sexual, but
You're right.
it was purely about
The
they
moment.
wanted.
Yeah, they
a
wanted that croissant. Yes, they wanted it.
And
they
they
wanted
wanted to
that
be-
buttery, crispy
Yeah.
croissant.
And it
And
was
they-
like, it was a big, fat, flaky croissant.
Oh my god!
And she
Jeez,
was,
brother.
yeah, it
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, I get it, but like,
Yeah.
this person had a moment. They had a moment in that theater.
It was an audible. Like,
Yeah.
it was during the
Theater
movie.
wide.
We all heard it, and it was lovely.
Yeah, it
Like,
was great.
I want to be on that person's level. I
Yeah.
want a croissant
that
to
bad.
make me come.
Yeah.
Like, that is
Yeah.
This is
what I
you say,
want
This is your kid
In a child's
movie
movie.
review.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, we never said this was PG. I mean, hey, listen, this
Well,
is still unhinged.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, really, at the end of the day, this is not the best movie ever because he made a few mistakes. But also, I think he needs to be rewarded. And because, as I said, we're not doing critic scores. Spoiler alert, but the critics are giving this a bit of a hard time. It's getting a 50-50 split. It's sitting at like 50-something% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, and we only have one reviewer within Criticless. Crisco has reviewed it. Last I checked, I had it pulled up here. Yeah.
Can we qualify that? It's not our Crisco.
Not this Crisco, but
This
the other
is our
Crisco. This is
Crisco.
Crisco 612 who has reviewed it, and I would read through it, but this is a longer one to read on the air. So, but it sounds like Crisco liked it fairly well and did have some problems with it, but at the same time gave it an 80%, which is right where I am. So make sure to go follow Crisco. Always dropping hot reviews and seeing things early because Crisco dropped this on May 11th, so saw this a few days ago. So I think he does a lot of early screenings and sometimes catches things. So
Okay.
anyways, long story short, that's the only review we have, so there's not really much to talk about as far as our scores yet, but it has about 90 or so critics and it's sitting at 50%. But I think that I mean, they're clearly marketing the crap out of this. They want people to see it. They think people are going to show up. This is a high budget movie. There are some stunning scenes. There is a whole bit with really no talking that goes on for quite a while when they're in the imaginary world that I think is excellent. Like, it is just a very clippable, like extractable. You could watch it at any moment and be like, this is really cool. When the girl is using her imagination and the world is just bending to it. It's like an Inception moment almost. Like, things are
Yeah.
just changing and happening in this imaginary world. It's really cool. But at the same time, what brings it down is Ryan Reynolds' vibe. So like, it's
True.
not perfect, but I do think that, I mean, personally, I would recommend that people see it just because I think that he has a lot of promise as a director and a creator. He just needs a couple more people in the writer's room to help kind of iron out what he's doing.
No,
But-
I agree. It feels like it should be a feel good movie,
Mhm.
and there should be a antagonist that's built into it
Right.
that helps build that feeling to it.
Right.
And it still does have a feel good to it
Right.
because everybody wins in the end.
They do.
But there could be more added on, I feel like.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah. I would say my final thought, just to kind of pull everything together we've been talking about, with is the main character insane? Is that what we're supposed to take from this? Or are we supposed to take that maybe it's a little of both, that somewhere metaphysically, spiritually, there really are imaginary friends, and yes, she was spiraling, but there is something real to this. There's a scene where the grandmother is dancing in her living room because the granddaughter puts on a song that's supposed to remind her of what it's like to be a child. It's supposed to connect her back to her imaginary friend when she was a child. And she's dancing and she's doing this ballet in the living room, and her IF, or her if, is back there, and the if lights up red, and that's supposed to signify that like there's this connection that's being made. And so it's almost like there's this moment that everything's real, that really the grandmother has connected back to her imaginary friend, and that this is all true. But the grandmother never turns around. She never
Right.
sees the if.
Yeah.
So it leaves, again, this idea hanging in the balance. Is the girl insane, or did the grandmother just never turn around and did she never see her if,
Right.
but she was there the whole time? So,
And maybe at the end of the day, what they're really trying to get across is it's just that sometimes we need to connect to our inner child. We need to connect to the things that make us happy, the things that make us who we are, and just remember that like sometimes things are heavy and hard, but there are these moments, these tethers that kind of bring us back down to reality and make us, just appreciative and enjoy life, and just to kind of ground yourself a little bit. And I think that's really the message here. Whether it is that she's insane or not, it is just that, that we need to just remember to just take a moment to just enjoy the better things in life, to remember when you were a kid and when nothing mattered and you're just freaking having fun and you're using your imagination and enjoying life.
and everyone remember that I was able to take 230 energy and bring it to that.
Right. But like also, fuck you guys.
Dang it.
So on that note, guys, I think that's pretty much it, because we're not talking about critic scores. We're not doing anything else. You pretty much know what we think, and I'm going to bring you that 230 energy, baby. So with that being said, we're going to go home. I'm going to go get me a little nappy poo, go to bed for the night. So we are done with this, but we've had a super fun time, and I'm glad you guys have joined us. And like I said earlier on, if you are not on criticless.com, make sure to do that, because it's a fun place to hang out. Tell your friends, tell your mommy, tell your mammy, tell your daddy, and everybody else, because we need people on here. We want to pack this thing out so that we are bigger than Rotten Tomatoes, because Rotten Tomatoes is a bitch. Sucks dick. Yeah, it does. So pack this thing out. Let's be the new standard for entertainment, because that's what we want to be, because we are way freaking cooler and we have a lot more fun. And that's all that matters at the end of the day, is having fun, not over criticizing. Sometimes movies just need a little bit of a participation trophy, even though we don't like those anymore. But like sometimes they kind of do in this scenario. So,
Period.
yeah, period. Like, don't have one, but like, because then you're going to be moody and angry and like keep that, like, we don't, but
Yeah.
snip,
Snip.
snip, snip, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Later.
Deuces.
Wait, do I do this?
Yeah, you do that.
Yep.
And then be like, these nuts.